J'ouvre maintenant la réunion.
Welcome to meeting number 126 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. The meeting is now in order. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, February 28th, 2024, the committee is resuming its consideration of Bill C-354.
Now, we're going to begin, and I'm going to give you the usual housekeeping. Please read the little card you've got on the table in front of you, please, witnesses. And because of sound quality, we need to make sure that you don't have any devices, such as your hearing devices, close to your microphone. So there's a little decal on your table. Can you put it face down on that when you're not using it? Also, you have to use these black phones and not your own. And we are not allowed to take photographs because this is going to be put on the website anyway, and you'll be able to get what you need out of it. Now, we're in a hybrid form, and for those of you who are virtual, I think Nikki Ashton is virtual. When you need to speak, please raise your hand on your website. And for those of you who are in the room, please put your hand up, and I'll recognize you based on when you put your hand up. At least we will try. Now, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. And I now want to welcome our witnesses. And I want to thank you for waiting, because normally we were supposed to start at 4. We're only half an hour late. But votes occurred, and they tend to push things back a little bit. Now, from 4:30 to 5:20, we're going to have as witnesses the Canadian Radio and Television and Communications Commission, CRTC, and it's represented by Scott Shortliff, Executive Director of Broadcasting, Scott Houghton, Chief of Consumer Research and Communications, and Rachel Frenette, Legal Counsel. Welcome. You have 5 minutes to present. Not each of you, but one of you on behalf of CRTC have 5 minutes. So you probably know who that's going to be. So we shall begin for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Shortliff.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us to appear in front of your committee. And before we begin our remarks, I would also like to thank the Algonquin Anishinaabe people for having us here as a guest on their unceded, unsurrendered territory. I'd also like to thank them for being stewards of the land and waters in this area since time immemorial. So I'm Scott Shortliff, Executive Director of Broadcasting. I'm joined by my colleague Scott Houghton, Chief of Consumer and Research, and Rachel Frenette, General Counsel. Before we get to your questions, we'll briefly touch on two things. First, the CRTC's role with respect to official languages and official language minority communities. We had decided to divide our 5 minutes. My colleague Scott Houghton will speak briefly on French culture and how it's been reflected in our decisions and as a result of our recent proceedings. So starting with our role, as you know, the CRTC is an independent quasi-judicial tribunal that regulates the Canadian communications sector in the public interest. We hold open public hearings on telecommunications and broadcasting matters and make decisions based on that public record. We're responsible for achieving the policy objectives of the Broadcasting Act. The Act recognizes, among other things, that the English and French-speaking communities have different requirements. We must consider the impact of our decisions with this in mind. In fact, the Online Streaming Act stated specifically that while the two communities share common aspects, it is our duty to consider the minority context of French in North America. This is something we strive to do in all of our decisions. Over the years, the CRTC has established regulatory policies that take into account the different needs of the French language market. These include, for example, the requirement that French language commercial radio stations play a certain percentage of French language music each week. We also require broadcasters in Canada to make certain culturally relevant channels available in markets where there are official language minority communities. These include important French language channels such as TVA, Ici ADI, and Météo Média. These measures are in part how we are fulfilling the mandate given to us by the Broadcasting Act to make English and French language broadcasting of equivalent access and quality across Canada.
Merci, Scott. Comme mon collègue Scott l'a affirmé.
As my colleague Scott mentioned at the beginning of our speech, as a quasi-judicial independent tribunal, the CRTC makes decisions based on the evidence submitted on the public record of its proceedings. We build that record by seeking input from the public and interested parties. That includes both English and French-speaking communities across Canada. Additionally, the views of Quebec are well represented in our processes through the interventions we receive from the Quebec public and interested parties like the Association québécoise de l'industrie du disque, du spectacle et de la vidéo, the Union des artistes, the Alliance de producteurs francophones, and the Quebec government. To give an example, many French-speaking groups and communities took part in our recent proceeding to implement the amended Broadcasting Act. The proceeding included special interest organizations like Audition Québec, community stations like Télévision communautaire du Témiscamingue, province-wide stations like Télé-Québec, and the Quebec government itself through an intervention from the Ministry of Culture and Communications. The ministry, for example, told us about the importance of acknowledging Quebec's support for its own broadcasting system and not penalizing broadcasters for receiving that provincial support. It is based on the public record and on all the input provided that we identified French language content and official language minority communities as two areas that need immediate support. Our decision on the base of contributions of online streaming services, published earlier this month, ensures that funding will be directed to these areas. This is just one example of many. French-speaking communities from across the country provide valuable input in all CRTC proceedings, including on the implementation of the Online News Act, the creation of the Internet Service Provider Code, and the reviewing of the Wireless Code, just to name a few.
Nous sommes tenus par la loi sur la radiodiffusion d'assurer.
We are required by the Broadcasting Act to ensure French language and official language minority communities have equitable access to broadcasting that meets their needs. We do this by basing every decision on the public record we build through open and transparent consultations. We look forward to building on our track record of success in this area and maintaining a constant dialogue with all our partners. Thank you. We look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Now, we're going to go to the question and answer period. And the first round is a 6-minute round, and 6 minutes includes the question and answer. So I'm going to begin with the Conservatives. Monsieur Good, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us. In Bill C-354, as it is written, are there any elements that are binding to the CRTC? What we shared in our opening remarks is that we consult with communities. Part 3 of the Act has to do with official language minority communities in Quebec, and we do examine this as we do with Radio-Canada and SRC. And so these are things that we do, and we do have participation of different companies, of different stakeholders, of the public. And this allows us to properly represent Francophone culture and Quebec culture. We understand that this seeks to see us do more, and this is requiring an additional step with the new CRTC Act. Would a brief coming from the Quebec government carry the same weight as one coming from a Francophone association. We examine all of the briefs sent to us, especially those based on data and exhaustive research. Every time the Culture Department of Quebec sends a brief, we do look into it. Are there other provincial governments that have sent in briefs, or other departments? Yes, there are different groups. Some provinces are more active than others, of course. We look at the north, the territories, where there's a lot of impact, and Ontario and BC are also very active with the CRTC. You talked about the distinctiveness of Quebec and how important it is to protect it. You talked about actions that you've done, but can you elaborate or perhaps repeat them, because it was not very clear? I will let Mr. Shortlift talk about his recent decision. There are previous decisions that were made, for example, French on radio stations 65%, and that's higher than English content for commercial radio. In a recent decision, we have a fund, a production fund. It is divided between French and English. 40% will be allocated to Francophone production. And there is a bit of flexibility for the digital players. In that case, there needs to be content in English and French, or French. If not, to give it to the Canadian Media Forum to ensure that there will be content in French. It's important to reach the 40% target because there's more pressure to have French content in North America, and we want more resources for that. Francophone communities and minority situations in other provinces are very active during CRTC consultations. Can you tell us more about this? Have you spoken to them? Do you reach out to them, or do they reach out to you on their own volition? I'll ask Madame Frenette to talk about it perhaps after, but at the CRTC we have a working group with OLMCs, whether they be English or French speaking, and we attempt to have discussions. It's not where we make decisions. However, we attempt to explain upcoming decisions and proceedings so that they may be prepared, and to allow them to be ready for consultations. Just like once a decision is made, we meet with the groups to share an overview of decisions. Question: has it happened that a government has contradicted a group within the same province? It's important to have the government's point of view as well as the private sector's point of view. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very much, and I go to the Liberals. Talib Nur Mohammed for 6 minutes, please. Talib.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here with us today. You spoke a fair bit about Mr. Shortlift. You spoke a lot about the nature of programming that takes place. Mr. Hutton touched on the consultations that do take place. How much is the government of Quebec consulted, or how much feedback do they give you on average during the course of a year?
It really depends on what we're consulting on, to be honest. If it affects Francophone interests and the interests of the province of Quebec, we have a long record. I was looking at it before we came of cases where they've intervened with us. But it depends from year to year. It depends on the subject. I will say that certainly they've taken a great interest in how Bill C-11 will affect Francophones and Francophone production, not only in Quebec, but across the country. We've seen them be more active, and we welcome that. We want to hear from all aspects of Canada, and we have a special interest in assuring that French is supported.
Can you think of any instances where Quebec or other provinces were not given the opportunity when they wanted to give you feedback, to give feedback?
There's none that I can think of. Certainly, we exist on the basis of public processes. We try to make them as well known as possible. We are open sometimes to procedural interventions if someone says they haven't been given a fair chance to speak in front of us. We have a long record of expanding our time. We would welcome interventions from Quebec and indeed from all provinces.
So, given everything that you've just said, and I would turn to either of you who might want to respond, or any of you who would want to respond to this. What would this bill do then in terms of, it seems to me like what the bill is asking for is already moot because you already do it. You're already doing extensive consultation. You're already listening. You're already hearing from all the provinces, particularly Quebec, on a very regular basis. So I'm just curious as to what value, without being disrespectful, what the value add of this would be, and frankly, if you could tell us what the risks of this might be.
Well, and I want to be very clear here. Our chair sometimes used the phrase that we're takers of legislation. If in the wisdom of Parliament it passes this bill, of course we will implement it fully and enthusiastically. So I want to be clear that we're not here to testify in any way, shape, or form against this legislation. I will say, as my colleague Mr. Hutton outlined, we do have a concern that if there's a growing tendency to say you must consult with this group, you must consult with that group, and it adds up over time, that can slow us down in a period of time when we're trying to move very fast. That is a concern we have, that if the Broadcasting Act is continually added to in that way. But I also want to make it clear, we're not here to say, therefore, we object to this bill. We do have a concern about our workload and about the expectations about consultations. Our view is that we consult openly. Anyone can come to us. If there is a bill, it can be read into in different ways. Will people have an expectation of pre-consultations? That is not in the bill, and I want to be clear that the bill is very carefully drafted. We are worried about expanding scope of who we have to consult with before we make a decision.
So I just want to be very clear that in the context of this, which speaks to, the government of Quebec, cultural distinctiveness of Quebec, and Francophone markets, you've said pretty clearly that extensive consultations already occur. There are no instances where the province of Quebec or any other province has not had the opportunity to be heard at whatever length they saw fit, that you go to great pains to make sure that those voices are heard and that their opinions are considered. What is your, if I were to put it this way, is there more that you could do, or do you feel that everything that is being done could possibly be done? Because it seems to me like it is. I don't want to lead you to a certain answer, but it seems to me that if everybody's saying we have the chance to talk to the CRTC at length, at whatever time and place that works for us on the issues that are of concern, particularly the Francophone community and to Quebec, and nobody's saying, hey, listen, the CRTC is shutting the door on us. I'm just curious if there is even anything more you could possibly do.
I'm going to ask my friend Mr. Hutton to answer, because in a legal sense, I don't think there's more to do. I think we can always do better reaching out to people and encouraging them to participate. Scott, would you like to address that a bit?
The new evolution of the Broadcasting Act certainly is asking us to do more consultation with everyone. to make sure that we do reflect the full diversity of Canada, that we do reflect the objectives for Canada's broadcasting system that are reflected in there. So certainly we've, with the act wisely passed by Parliament, we are stepping up, what I would call more our engagement approaches, which is, I mentioned before what we're
17
doing
seconds.
with the OLMC groups is doing more issues that. We've established a group, Indigenous Relations team, which is going out throughout the country and visiting with various Indigenous communities to try to, get the pulse of those communities and ensure that they actually participate in our proceedings. So there is always more we can do, and we are working on that right now.
Thank you very much. I now go to the Bloc Québécois. Martin Champoux, 6 minutes, Martin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to come back to what Mr. Noor Mohammed was asking, speaking up about the burden, the additional burden. I've heard arguments against Bill C-354, but nothing has led me to believe that it was a bad idea, that we would need to talk about something. And perhaps we could examine an amendment regarding consultations with other provincial governments. Mr. Shortliff and Mr. Hutton, you both said that this would add an extra layer of work. How do you inform the Quebec government about hearings? How do you see that process? How would it be an additional task in the way that you carry out your work? Answer: we send out our advisories. We try to do more awareness raising. I'm going to interrupt you. We already do it. But what we take issues with, and we will implement it if we must, it's just that consultations go beyond advising that something is coming. It seems to be an additional step. That's why, because we're already doing all of these good things, as you know, adding this other layer, well, people expect more. It's not necessarily defined. But what the bill says is that you have to consult. And this doesn't seem to be very significant for time constraints. And we understand that the Quebec's government with C11 is reacting a little late, but this seems quite simple. We want Quebec to be informed and consulted when hearings are going to happen on specific topics. I will give you 2 examples to share how the CRTC might require some insight from the Quebec government. In 2005, there was CKRC that closed a radio station, and the National Assembly asked the CRTC to not allow for this closure of this station. It was part of Quebec's heritage. But the CRTC decided to maintain its position and to allow for that station to be closed. Same for 911. 911 services in Quebec were not regulated. Services did not have to be offered in French in Quebec, and the Quebec government asked the CRTC to change that, but the CRTC did not change its rules. It informed telecommunications companies, please adjust. And so I think it's justified that there needs to be more in-depth consultations. We're not saying that you're not doing your jobs. I hope that's not the impression that you're getting from me. We're asking that you tell the government of Quebec what's coming and say to the different groups, this is what's coming, please send us a brief. It doesn't mean that everything that you suggest will be implemented. It just shows that you will be hearing them out. It's not that difficult. So that's why I wonder what you mean when you say that it's an additional burden, an additional task. In many cases, Quebec does send in a brief in proceedings. Unanimous motions, whether they be from Quebec or other provinces or their chambers, we do a focus on them, on these comments. You talk about information. These are things that we already do, and of course we can always make improvements. And we take issue with the word consultation because it seems to be less clear, because in our other proceedings it means something more significant. We are an independent government agency, and we're a little uncomfortable. We're asking us to consult governments in a different way, so that we're a little bit uncomfortable. I know I have very little time left. Do you agree that in the case of Quebec and the situation of French in North America, well, it might be justified for Quebec to be consulted on specific issues? We listen very carefully to what Quebec has to say during our hearings, and they are significant stakeholders, and we want to ensure the success of the francophonie in Quebec. And that's what I will be able to respond to your question.
Very much. For the New Democrats, Nikki Ashton. Nikki, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Ma première question, c'est pour Monsieur Hutton.
My question's for Mr. Hutton. Mr. Hutton, has the CRTC taken concrete measures in its operations in recent years after seeing the data from StatsCan?
Point of order. Can we just get it turned down a little bit? I can't hear even the translation. It's so loud, the speakers. Just a little bit. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Hopefully it's better now.
Yeah, that's better.
OK. Oui, c'est ça. Depuis les données...
We've received data from StatsCan that showed that for the first time in history, French is declining not only throughout Canada, but also in Quebec. With this data, this has had an impact on work at Parliament. Does it have an impact on your work at the CRTC? I can start, and perhaps Ms. Frenette could also answer. The CRTC is an organization under Section 7 of the Official Languages Act, and we have a mandate to do our best to support OLMCs throughout the country, and we take this very seriously. We consult these groups on upcoming proceedings, we inform them of decisions made, we seek their comments, their feedback. We hear suggestions from different groups. We also take into account comments in our reports that we share with the Official Languages Office, and we work in partnership with Heritage, the Department of Heritage. And so we share year after year how we've supported OLMCs. And as Mr. Shortliff mentioned, we have taken measures to support programming in French throughout the country by imposing support for audio and for promoting diversity in Canada, especially for OLMCs. I don't know if Ms. Frenette has anything to add. No, I believe that your answer was quite clear. I just wanted to say that the CRTC must follow the Official Languages Act. We need to take measures in order to support OLMCs and to allow them to flourish. And we also need to have measures in the Broadcasting Act to support OLMCs. Adding these obligations in broadcasting, well, the CRTC is well aware of the realities of the OLMCs, and the CRTC does its best to support these communities. Now, on the question of consultations, other colleagues have asked questions on Quebec, but the decline is quite noticeable in Western Canada as well. What types of consultations do you carry out with Francophone communities in Western Canada, and so groups outside of Quebec? So with Western provinces. We know the communities, the groups that represent these communities. We invite them to participate in our public proceedings. Recently, we saw files that would impact the Francophone community in Alberta, and we sought the comments of these communities so that we can make decisions that reflect the needs of those communities. Very well.
In English, I was interested in hearing a bit more about your consultation with Indigenous communities. Obviously, that somehow, that connects somehow to official languages, but is, I think, something that all of us as parliamentarians would like to hear more about, given Canada's responsibilities around reconciliation. So, if you could share some feedback on the kind of work you're doing in terms of consulting with Indigenous communities.
Absolutely. I might start, then I'll ask.
The biggest ones.
Yeah. I'll start.
52 seconds.
Okay, I'll do it very quickly then. We've currently launched a process on co-developing a Indigenous broadcasting policy. We had done a first stage pre-COVID, and then with COVID, we unfortunately had to stop. We are soliciting interventions from Indigenous people. It's going to be a bit of a long process because we want to co-develop. We don't want it to be just coming from the CRTC. We want to work with Indigenous audiences and creators across Canada, help them define what Indigenous content is and what is relevant to their communities. And I'll just throw in, because we're short on time, we've also created an Indigenous Relations Unit, which reports to Mr. Hutton, that is actively creating links with Indigenous communities, both on the broadcasting and telecom fronts, that will serve us well in the years to come.
Sorry?
Oh, 3 seconds. Well, I'll just say that, in the somewhat public forum, we are hoping that Indigenous people will participate more. We know we have to do more outreach. We know it can be difficult to come in front of a quasi-judicial tribunal, as we frequently call ourselves. We need to do more with Indigenous people, and we need to involve them in creating policies, because we are reflecting their nations and their realities as well as a broader Canadian reality. And it is something we are very much committed to as a commission.
You could have an extra 10 or 15 seconds. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go to the second round. And the second round would be, I'm going to make a truncated round of that. It's going to be 2 5 minutes and 2.5. We're not going to go to the second piece of the second round because we have to move on. So now, Ms. Thomas for the Conservatives. 5 minutes, please, Rachel.
Thank you very much. I guess a very quick question that I have for you is this bill uses the word consult. If this bill were to go through, how would the CRTC define consult? How would you know, in fact, that you have done so?
Since the bill hasn't passed, we haven't turned our minds to exactly how we would implement it. We would, of course, need to see the final version of the bill. What I could say is we do try to interpret bills in the spirit in which Parliament passes them. So we would take consultation as being meaningful, that we would need to reach out to the province of Quebec and make sure that they have the opportunity to intervene in our processes.
Sure. So one of the things that continuously is happening at this table is there's a lot of talk about consulting with Quebec, but you'll note that Bill C-354 also requires you to consult with the governments of other provinces, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely, and that is an element we'd have to look into. We're very aware of the status of official language minority communities across Canada. We are trying to do more with them. Our annual meeting with them has now become a 3 times a year meeting, and we would absolutely respect the bill and be reaching out to every province to discuss the status of their official language minority communities.
Great. You're of course here as representatives from the CRTC. You're responsible for regulating radio, television, and now under Bill C-11, the internet. You've already stated that that's a pretty big job. There, of course, are many anxious players in the field that are looking for a definition to CanCon. It was defined in the 1970s. It's quite antiquated. It was created for radio and broadcast television. Those players that need this definition, of course, are making business decisions day in and day out, and they've been told to sit tight, that there's other regulatory decisions being made first. When can they expect an updated definition to CanCon?
So we're working on several steps. We're looking at a hearing early next year, but what we've done so far this year is we did engagement sessions with members of the industry in cities across Canada. We had over 300 participants in that. That gave us a good view of what members of the industry think. That includes, by the way, streamers. It was not just with traditional Canadian broadcasters. We're working now on a report on that. We're also trying to stand up some
Sorry,
public
I'll just bring you
opinion
back
research.
to my question here, because you're getting off topic. I'm just asking when can stakeholders expect a definition of CanCon?
In 2025.
In 2025?
Yeah.
At what point in 2025?
I'm unable to give you a precise point yet, but we're trying to move it up as fast as possible.
So do you think like spring of 2025?
I really can't give you a precise estimate at this time. I'm sorry.
Why was the definition of CanCon not given priority? It seems like that should have been the thing to lead with.
The Commission made a decision to start with contributions to the system. We see CanCon as a priority. I'll say that one of the elements of CanCon we need to do is engage Canadians on the definition of CanCon and not just the industry. That does take some time, but we realize that this is something important that we need to get right. And that
so one of the
will
things
take
that
some
streamers
time.
are stuck with, of course, is now paying a 5% tax, and it's going to go into a fund that is going to pay for CanCon, but they don't actually know what CanCon is. Don't you think that's a little backwards?
Well, they're being asked to make a contribution, obviously taxes are collected by revenue. We've actually given them the flexibility saying if you spend on the existing definitions of CanCon, there is an existing definition, instead of contributing to a fund, you can spend directly. Our objective here is to create more Canadian content. It's not necessarily to support a fund. We've given them that
you just
flexibility.
used the definition Canadian content, but you actually haven't updated it for them yet. But you've told them that that's what the money is for.
There is an existing definition, which we have said we are in the process of updating. They can use the existing definition for direct spending currently.
So I think just to be really clear here, you basically just issued some word salad to basically say they still can sit tight, but they'll be forced to pay this 5% tax towards something that they actually don't even know what it is because it's not yet defined according to the definition that will be coming in 2025. So you're asking them to pay a new tax towards an antiquated
27
definition.
seconds?
I would say that we've asked them to contribute to the Canadian broadcasting system as the bill passed by Parliament requires us to do. They are doing it in many different ways. They have flexibility in how they're doing it.
Mr.
We will
Shortliff, I'm
continue
going to cut you off there
update our-
because I do need to move a motion, but thank you very much for giving it your best shot. Motion moving. It's not up. I just gave notice that I'm moving a motion, which means the clock stops. I am moving a motion, given the amount. I'm sorry, Chair. I just said that I'm
Go ahead,
moving a motion.
Please, Ms. Thomas.
I'm
Move
just
your
being
motion.
interrupted by the across the table.
Move your motion.
Thank you. The motion that I wish to move is as follows. Given the amount of outstanding work at this committee, the committee instructs the chair to schedule 5 meetings between July 8th and September 13 to address reports that consumers may face higher prices after streaming giants are told to invest $200 million in Canadian film, TV, and music, and the impact this will have. The minister's outstanding appearance on anti-racism and other matters deemed relevant by the committee. The reason why I'm moving this motion is because this committee certainly has still quite a few things on the docket that are outstanding. There's nothing that precludes us as individuals here at this committee from working over the summer. And so my suggestion is that we would then take on 5 meetings from July 8th to September 13th. Let me give some examples. Bill C-11, of course, threatens the choice and reasonable prices that Canadians have with regards to access to streaming, and the slowness with which regulations are rolling out from the CRTC does need to be looked into. The impact that those regulations are going to have, not only on Canadians as consumers, but also on stakeholders, is really important for this committee to better understand. In addition to that, we have a motion that was brought forward by Ms. Ashton asking for a study on, asking for the minister, to come concerning the anti-racism strategy. And it was agreed to at this committee that we would try to do that as soon as possible. And so that is something that could be done over the summer. Furthermore, the CBC CEO, Ms. Catherine Tate, was here earlier, just about 6 weeks ago, and she stated to us that the board for the CBC would be meeting this month, June, in order to determine the bonuses that would be given to executives. And of course, I think this committee has great interest in knowing what the final decision was concerning those bonuses. That decision, of course, again, will be made in June, and then they're supposed to be dished out in July. And so as the CEO for the CBC, we would have the opportunity to bring her forward and to ask her questions with regards to that decision-making process, therefore allowing for transparency and accountability concerning the $1.4 billion taxpayer dollars that go towards the CBC every year. These are just a few of the reasons why it would be a good idea for us as a committee to meet over the summer, and so I am therefore moving this motion.
Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Coteau?
Yeah, I'd like to move adjournment of debate on the motion.
Simple majority? Did you wish to speak, Mr. Shampoo? There's a motion on the table. Sorry. No, I know.
Yeah.
I know you did. Mr. Shampoo was saying something. I didn't know if it was a point of order or not. Okay, so no one else wishes to speak on this, so I shall call the vote on it, please.
The vote is on the motion to adjourn debate. Mr. Noor Mohammed,
Yes.
Mr. Coteau,
Yes.
Ms. Dillon, Ms. Gainey, Madame Latanzio, Mr. Wall,
No.
Ms. Thomas,
No.
Monsieur Gould,
No.
Mr. Lawrence,
No.
Monsieur Shampoo, Ms. Ashton.
Yes.
Yes pour 7-7, nays contre 4-4.
The motion does not carry. So we shall resume this. We have about we have another 5 and 5:10 more minutes to go on this before we leave. So I will go with, for the Liberals, Michael, for 5 minutes, please.
Here we go. Thank you, Chair.
I had the floor, right? It was
You had the floor when you
Yeah.
brought forward your
at 5
motion to
minutes,
adjourn.
right?
You have 5 minutes, yes.
So it's my turn now.
I would
to
just,
go?
I would
Okay,
just raise a
thank
point
you.
of order.
Yes, Ms. Thomas, what is your point of order?
Thank you. So Chair, I'll just highlight for you that you just ruled that the motion to adjourn does not carry,
Oh, I'm sorry.
which means that we are then continuing to discuss my motion.
Miss Thomas, you know what I meant. You heard the
No,
vote.
I don't.
You
I
heard
don't,
the
Chair.
vote.
I'm giving you the
vote did
opportunity
not carry.
as a
All right,
courtesy
I
to
shall
you
correct
to
this then.
clarify.
Clarify. The motion to adjourn carries. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Cotto.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. So I read the bill, and I read some of the background documents, and it seems pretty simple. It says, we go out there and consult the Quebec government and other provinces, but you're saying that we do that already. Is that correct?
What we're saying is that we're open to anyone participating in our proceedings. We frequently have provinces and territories participating in our proceedings. They are open to all, whether it's a province or an individual.
So you've read the bill, or at least the notes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any difference between what this is asking and what you currently do? Are there any specifics?
Did you want to, or okay? I think, again, and I have to be very careful about this, we're not here testifying against the bill. We're not.
That's not the question,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Yeah.
I'd say, but what we are saying is when you say there is a duty to consult, our concern is that if next year in Parliament of its wisdom adds a duty to consult with another group and another group, at a certain point, do our proceedings become unworkable?
Okay.
So it's a future look.
And I understand. I understand the term duty to consult. Like from that perspective, I understand being required is different from consulting. So we know that the French language is probably the fastest growing language internationally. I think by 2050 there'll be 750 million speakers on the planet. It's growing rapidly. There's 125 million learners as we speak today around the world. The content's important for Canada, but it also contributes content to the world. And so there's an economic piece. Obviously, there's a second language responsibility as Canadians, as part of who we are as Canadians, but there's an economic piece to it. All across this country, we have pockets, outside of Quebec, large pockets in some cases of Quebec, French-speaking Canadians. So my question is, over the last 5 years, and one of your responsibilities, your mandate is to issue licenses and to regulate, but how many licenses have you issued to French-speaking communities outside of Quebec?
I would have to take an undertaking and get back to you on that. I'm afraid I don't have the number with me directly, but we have licensed television services, radio stations, community radio stations. I can get a full breakdown and bring it to you, and would be happy to do so. I'll also say that we also work with and consult with, for example, French production companies. I mentioned earlier that we traveled across Canada asking about definitions of Canadian content. When we did that, we also met with production companies. I had the opportunity to sit down with the French language production company.
Can I jump in? I only have a few minutes.
I'm sorry.
I
was
really
enthusiastic.
appreciate your answer.
Yeah.
I just so one of your mandate is to create, connect, and protect.
Yeah.
A big part of that would be making sure that French-speaking Canadians have the type of content that contributes to keeping people connected and providing the right information. I know you don't create content, but you create the conditions that allow that to happen. So my question is, in this current environment, and we've seen like media, shift drastically, do you issue licenses where it may potentially not make money, but at the same time, serves to protect and create and promote?
We do, certainly with community stations. I think, though, we want to have a virtuous circle where supporting French also makes you money, and we're looking at how to do that. And I think we also see one thing that with streaming and other services, there's also an opportunity to bring French Canadian content across the world.
Right.
And we think that, when we talk about integrating streaming services in, it's not just challenges, it is also opportunities. And it's something that we're looking forward to engaging more with them about.
I heard you say at the very beginning that there was a requirement for French speaking channels to have a certain amount of French content. If they're French speaking channels, shouldn't they be entirely French?
35 seconds.
I'll just say that it's interesting. For example, if you look at French radio stations, they have said to us openly, younger people are listening a lot to English songs. They are, because it's popular, and that they go to streaming services and listen to songs. So the radio stations sometimes say, can we broadcast less in French? And we've said that we understand what you're saying to us in the business pressures, but having French available is an absolute necessity. And that is the judgment that the Commission has made today.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I now go to Martin Champoux for 2.5 minutes, Martin.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Shortliff. Earlier you talked, or I know it's a Scot who said this to me. Anyway, you talked about how you reach out to OLMCs and you factor in the impact on French. You also stated that you are developing relationships with Indigenous communities, and that's great. And so you are working on consulting them systematically as well. And I'm not trying to ask a trick question here, but in the eyes of the CRTC, is Quebec considered in the same way as OLMCs, or does Quebec have a special status? Answer: during our proceedings, that's when we make decisions as an administrative tribunal, all points of view are valid and we focus on data. I understand that, but I only have 2.5 minutes. For OLMCs, we do have obligations. We have to consult, we have to make positive actions, as in the Act. And so that's what we do. You already have these obligations to consult certain groups like OLMCs and like what you are attempting to develop with Indigenous groups. So you're not strangers to this process. Quebec, well, that said, Quebec is not just another group. Quebec is an essential tool in protecting and promoting French in Quebec, in Canada, and in North America. And again, I want to thank you. We agree. And I would like to come back to what you said earlier. The CRTC often stood up to broadcasters that wanted to lower French content, and the CRTC often defended cultural organizations that are often in front of you. Thank you very much.
Nikki Ashton, 2.5 minutes, please, Nikki.
OK, merci beaucoup. Je pense une grande...
Thank you. I think that a lot of what's been proposed today is support for broadcasters, francophone broadcasters, especially, well, throughout the country, but recognizing their importance in OLMCs.
Particularly around the question of challenges that smaller local broadcasters face, not specific to the francophone context, but more broadly. CHTM AR Radio here in northern Manitoba performs a essential service in the radio services they provide. They are, they are community radio in what is largely a media desert. And in fact, just recently, when wildfires burnt down the fiber optic cables to Flim Flon, one of our major centers, everybody was getting their news about fires, possible evacuations, etc., from AR radio, part of the CHTM AR network. But they have been clear about some of the challenges they face, particularly around CanCon. They get a lot of their music from services such as DMDs, that usually provide MAPL data. But it's left to them to decide, based on the 3 categories, if it fits the list, et cetera, which I'm sure you can appreciate for a small radio station that is doing essential work can be quite taxing. And so one of the things that they've raised is challenges with respect to the CRTC data. And I'm just wondering, wouldn't it be better for stations across Canada to have access to the exact database that the CRTC works with, instead of having small radio stations expend resources they don't have, capacity they don't have, trying to guess if a song was made by a Canadian artist, recorded in Canada, et cetera,
22 seconds?
And if I can leave that with you.
15 seconds. I think your point is extremely well taken. 2 of the pieces of work we're looking at now is how to reduce the administrative burden on radio stations, because we do think that perhaps it has grown greater than it should be. Secondly, we're looking at possible solutions for a database of Canadian content, so that we can offer a solution. These aren't done yet, and of course, the government's record on making sure it has databases and technological solutions that roll out seamlessly is not perfect, but it is something we see as a priority. We know that radio stations need help, and we do see them, as you so eloquently put it, as being absolutely key and core to communities, especially with community newspapers across Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Shortliff. I want to thank the members very much, or the witnesses, for coming in and sharing some of your wisdom with us. And I will now suspend for a few minutes for us to go into the second group. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today we are meeting our second round of witnesses on the bill. Sorry, everyone. I am just a little punchy. I did not sleep at all last night because I came in on a red eye. And so I sometimes don't even know what I'm saying right now. So we're having witnesses on Bill C-354. And I will introduce the witnesses. They are Fédération culturelle canadienne française, Manon Henri Cadeau, Director of Strategy and Government Relations, Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes du Canada, Leanne Roy, President by video conferencing, and Serge Kinty, Director of Communications. Please begin now. Just quickly, you have 5 minutes to present, but it's only per group, so that the Fédération des communautés francophones will have only 5 minutes, and Manon will have 5 minutes. So I want to thank you for coming, and please begin. We'll begin with Manon Henri Cadeau. For 5 minutes, please. Ms. Cadeau.
Merci.
Thank you. Dear members of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage, Madam Chair, members of the committee, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me to appear before you today. My name is Manon Henri Cadieux, and I'm the Director of Strategy and Government Relations for the Fédération culturelle canadienne française, FCCF. As a reminder, the FCCF is the political voice of arts and culture in the Canadian and Acadian Francophonie on the national scene. Our organization exercises its leadership in the broadcasting file in frank collaboration and with the support of the FCCF. Active and visible since the Yale Report, and then on subsequent bills, the FCCF has contributed to highlighting the particular context, as well as the specific issues and needs of minority Francophone communities. We are deeply involved in ongoing advocacy work with the CRTC to ensure the effective implementation of the Online Streaming Act, both through our active participation in the ongoing public consultation process, particularly on the strengthened provisions regarding the obligation and manner of consulting our communities, not to mention our structuring contribution within a dedicated mechanism, the CRTC CLOSM discussion group. Thank you very much for inviting us to discuss the prospects offered by the Bloc Québécois Bill C-354. Point of order, Madam Chair? Madam Chair, just a point of order. We're trying to hear our witnesses, and there's a lot of chatter around the table.
Names were going up on the round.
D'accord, merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Madame la Présidente, j'ai simplement indiqué.
Madam Chair, I was just saying that there was a lot of chatting happening around the table, and it was hard to focus on the witness. Thank you.
You could, everyone chatting, please take it outside because I think we're finding difficulty focusing. Thank you very much.
Grand merci de votre invitation à venir.
Thank you very much for inviting us to discuss the prospects offered by the Bloc Québécois Bill C-354. This bill would amend the CRTC Act to require the CRTC to consult the Quebec government on its cultural specificity before carrying out its mission and exercising its powers over aspects of the Canadian broadcasting system, which we welcome. The fact that Quebec would be able to exercise a right of review before the Commission on its cultural specificity would have the effect of raising the importance of protecting and promoting the French language, which would also be beneficial to us. The FCCF is asking the CRTC and the government to ensure that the measures taken to support the French language have a greater impact, from support for French language production to the discoverability of our cultural content. Our elected representatives, including yourselves, have just begun work on modernizing the Official Languages Act to strengthen its obligations. The goal of achieving substantive equality of the official languages has been renewed, and we must act. In 2024, in light of the challenges facing the future of the French language and culture around the world, and ahead of the next Francophonie Summit scheduled for October in Paris, Canada must show leadership. This bill would make a significant difference. As representatives of the vital cultural sector, we've come to tell you about the importance of deleting the passage in the bill that would mean that, like Quebec, the other provinces would be called upon to declare their francophone market to the CRTC. This is simply impossible. We must do away with this misguided idea and ensure that our groups, which are representative of francophone communities on these issues, are appointed instead. Our mandates are legitimate, our representation structure is duly constituted, and we have the necessary expertise. We have a proven track record in guiding the development of public policy in support of the francophonie. We are the only stakeholders in a position to exercise our competence in terms of knowledge of the realities on the ground. Thank you for agreeing that our groups are in the best position to inform the CRTC of the needs of French-speaking minority communities. The choices our country is about to make in support of our language and culture will be more decisive than ever for the future and for the influence of the diversity of our cultural expressions here and around the world. Thank you for listening. It's a great pleasure for me to report on your discussions and answer your questions.
You could elaborate on what you didn't finish when you asked the question. Thank you very much. I now go to the Fédération des communautés francophones et acadiennes. Who is going to speak?
C'est Madame Roy qui va parler.
Madame, okay, sorry, Madame Roy. Please begin for 5 minutes.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, committee members, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting us to appear before you today with our colleagues from the Fédération culturelle canadienne-française. My name is Liane Roy, and I'm accompanied by our Director of Communications, Mr. Serge Quinty, who is with you in the room and will be able to answer your questions. The FCFA is the national voice of 2.8 million French-speaking Canadians living in minority situations in 9 provinces and 3 territories. Our organization leads a national network of some 900 French language organizations and institutions across the country. Our communities are determined to live in French, and every day they work to do so. Over the years, we have invested in a number of areas and sectors necessary to the vitality of our francophonie. The media and audiovisual space is one of them. We have developed a network of French language community radio stations. We have an educational television station, TFO, which is present not only in Ontario, but also in Manitoba and other provinces. We're constantly working with Radio-Canada to increase the reflection of our communities, not only in the content of regional stations, but also in national programs and news. In recent years, 2 of our country's major laws have been modernized. The FCFA took a leadership role in the modernization of the Official Languages Act. At the same time, we supported the FCCF's work to ensure that the new Online Streaming Act adequately take into account the realities and needs of our communities. One of the major gains in this respect is the addition to the Online Streaming Act of Section 5.2, which obliges the CRTC to consult official language minority communities when making decisions that have an impact on them. This section is absolutely essential because, and I admit, the CRTC's consideration of our realities over the years has been uneven and, in many cases, unsatisfactory. For 18 years now, there has been a CRTC official language communities discussion group, which essentially is just that, discussion. It's not an advisory body. In fact, since October 2023, our communities have been calling for this group to be transformed into a full-fledged advisory committee. This transformation is necessary in view of the CRTC's new obligations under the Online Streaming Act. All this to say that we agree that it's important for the CRTC to consult much more systematically on the realities of the country's French-speaking markets, including Quebec's cultural distinctiveness. However, one part of Bill C-354 is problematic, and that dealing with Francophone markets outside Quebec. As worded, the bill calls for consultation with provincial governments on the realities of these markets. To be quite frank, the sensitivity these governments may have towards the French-speaking community is of variable geometry. Some governments have difficult relations with their Francophone communities. Francophone and Acadian communities, and more specifically, the organizations that make them up, are in a much better position to describe the realities of Francophone markets to the CRTC, as required by the bill. The FCFA, the FCCF, provincial and territorial Francophone organizations, the Alliance nationale de l'industrie musicale, and the Alliance des producteurs francophones du Canada have all been part of the CRTC OLMC discussion group for 18 years now. This demonstrates that the CRTC understands and recognizes their legitimacy to speak on behalf of Francophone and Acadian communities. We therefore respectfully ask you to amend Bill C-354 so that Francophone and Acadian community organizations, and not provincial governments, are the CRTC's primary interlocutors for reporting on the realities of Francophone markets outside Quebec. Thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
Now we go into the question and answer section, and I think we're going to only have time for one 6-minute round. And so we begin with the Conservatives, Mr. Good.
Sorry, are we not hearing from the other witness?
Oh, so I'm sorry. Gosh, this is what happens when you don't get any sleep. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I think we only have 2 people who presented, so we're now getting into question and answer. So, now I begin with Mr. Good for the Conservatives for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci aux témoins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. Ms. Hunt, you talked about a discussion group. Can you tell me more about this, please? No, that's what we would want. The discussion group is only a discussion group, and since October 2023, community organizations would like for this discussion group to become an advisory group. Thank you, Ms. Roy. Earlier, we spoke with the CRTC. They seem to be a little tepid about the bill, if I can say it this way. They don't want to give an advantage to the Quebec government. And they don't want to do this for any other government, provincial government, either. They invite anyone to send in a brief that includes governments, associations throughout the country, and they don't put additional weight to a brief from a government. Have you noticed that this is, in fact, the way the CRTC does things? Answer. Thank you for the question. The CRTC does like to carry out consultations and public hearings. What's important for us would be to have one-on-one discussions with the CRTC. I will ask Serge, Director of Communications, to comment because he has more experience on this matter. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Gould. When we meet with the discussion group, the message shared by the CRTC is that consultation done by the CRTC is in fact done through public hearings. And so we prepare ourselves for these hearings. There's a file, and then they make a decision. The CRTC has obligations through the new Broadcasting Act. It must consult communities that might be impacted, and of course they have to take positive measures because of the Official Languages Act. And so they could carry out other consultations upstream. For both witnesses, including Ms. Roy, the CRTC wants to maintain its independence regarding decisions. Consulting governments before might create issues with that. Do you have any comments, Ms. Roy? I believe that Mr. Quinty was quite clear in his answer. Then I will ask Mr. Quinty. The CRTC seemed uncomfortable with receiving a government brief because of its independence and its impartiality. Do you agree with the CRTC's position? Answer. It's a quasi-judicial tribunal. And so, consultations are held through public hearings and having public files, and they make decisions based on all of this. This is what's been in place for years. And now there's a new Online Streaming Act, which includes consultation requirements, and they are not limited to OLMCs. It includes Indigenous people and diversity groups. The CRTC is currently attempting to see how to adjust to these new requirements. That's why the FCFA and the FCCF worked hard. And with the discussion group, we talked about this new way of doing things and how things need to change. There are new consultation obligations with the new Broadcasting Act. And so that's what our position is, Mr. Gould. So seeing the CRTC evolve, 41 seconds, this is something that organizations would welcome as a quasi-judicial tribunal. It should be able to adjust better to the future. Thank you.
Now go to the Liberals. Talib Noor Mohammed. Talib, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup d'être ici avec.
Thank you very much for being with us today. You're aware of consultations that the CRTC does with Quebec and other Francophone communities throughout the country. They stated today that they have never received complaints regarding how many consultations they carry out. Can you give us examples where Francophone communities felt like they were not heard? I can't speak on behalf of Quebec because the FCFA works with minority Francophone communities. We have been saying for years that the discussion group needs to be changed so that we have more targeted discussions. We meet with groups that have expertise in the different provinces and territories. And it's been the same groups for 18 years. The fact that it's been the same groups for 18 years shows how legitimate these groups are to the CRTC. And so, yes, for years we've been saying that these meetings are unsatisfactory, that the group needs to be more than it is currently, and given the obligation for consultations that the CRTC now has, it's essential that that group evolve to better equip the CRTC to do its work. Question. With new legislation, they will carry out consultations, and they stated today that they want to improve the consultation process. They've also said that consulting with Quebec and the provinces is something that happens frequently. They don't close the door to Quebec or Francophone communities. It's difficult for me to understand how this bill will help improve the consultation process. How they can hear voices from Quebec better. They've stated that they respect these voices, that they hear from these different groups frequently. And so it is difficult for me to understand how this bill will help. Answer. I don't have information on the CRTC's process with Quebec. I can speak to the rights of Francophone communities in minority situations, and with the new Online Streaming Act, we seek to consult these groups further and see how to do things. You can look at section 5.2, which is very interesting. It has improved the quality of the process that needs to happen. There will be opinions that will be heard. They were concerned of the weight of these opinions, and the FCCF and the FCFA raised the matter of low Francophone representation culturally. We have seen things that are encouraging, but there are still improvements, and we would like to know more. We want to know what the impact would be of decisions that have already been taken or that are about to be taken on the rights of our communities. This is what we will focus on. And I can also say that during a public hearing, during the consultation process, which is ongoing, there were moments that representatives of Francophone minority communities felt like issues from minority groups were not entirely heard.
So, Martin, you good?
Le tour de parole de mon collègue Talib, mais je peux
No,
bien.
I know you. Are you good?
Je peux certainement prendre son.
It was my colleague Talib's turn, but I can take his time if you want.
I have one thing. Tout ça, c'est bien entendu.
This is all heard. But adding something like this, I don't think that it would change the way the CRTC will carry out its consultations. But the CRTC's mandate with C11 will improve the process. I think that that's the way to reach the goals that you are seeking.
Mr. Noor Mohammed, Martin, 6
Merci.
minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je veux juste
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to state that I am impressed by Mr. Noor Mohammed's French, and I would like to commend him for taking his 6 minutes and speaking entirely in French. Congrats. I'm pleased to see all three of you here. We've met before in different contexts, and I've had the opportunity to speak with some of you regarding concerns on consulting the provinces. Ms. Henri Cadieux, in your opening remarks, and perhaps you can say more about this, but you stated that you believe that the consultation mechanism is not good only for Quebec, but is beneficial for French in Canada. Can you elaborate, please? Because I find this point of view very interesting. Quebec defends French and has the tools to defend French, and how it has an impact outside of Quebec. Answer. We are concerned by the complexity of issues regarding protecting and promoting the French language, given its decline and given other indicators on things shared by Radio-Canada and concerns regarding cultural content. We need to wake up and understand the importance of these issues. And you have decided to modernize the Official Languages Act. You have supported positive measures, and they need to lead to concrete actions that can be measured. And so do not stop at hearing about positive measures, but really wait to hear about the positive impacts. There are many steps left, and this is something we will continue to share. Ms. Roy, I can see that your headphones are facing the right direction. I thought you had them backwards. This is a bit of an inside joke between the two of us. You talked about the consultation process and the link between the CRTC and your organization, especially when there are hearings, and how it is systematic. How are the interlocutors decided? Is it always the same organizations? How do we know that the right organizations are going to be speaking to the CRTC? Answer. As I mentioned, and as the other witnesses mentioned, there is a committee of the CRTC with OLMCs. It's a discussion group, as I mentioned. And so there are discussions on upcoming hearings. And during these meetings, it is sometimes recommended to include certain organizations. Now, I'm not a part of that discussion group, and so I will ask Mr. Quinte to answer your question and give specifics. Thank you for the question, Mr. Champoux. I would like to make the distinction between public hearings. Well, for that, the CRTC sends out calls and notices for consultation, and civil society, anyone, in fact, can participate. And it's not necessarily people that are invited. You have to submit your request by the deadline. After that, there is the CRTC OLMC group, which includes provincial and territorial francophone groups that are members of the FCFA and the FCCF, the Producteurs francophones, the Association Musicale, and another group are part of that discussion group. But currently, that is not a consultation body, and that is what we're trying to change. Thank you very much. I think I have about 30 seconds left, Madam Chair, and I would... Oh, 6 seconds more than I thought. I would like to thank Ms. Roy and Ms. Henri Cadieux and Mr. Quintet. They did not hesitate to share their concerns with us regarding other provincial governments being part of this bill. This has allowed us to have open discussions, and this could be a relevant amendment for francophone groups outside of Quebec to be consulted. And so the Bloc Québécois would be more than welcome to examine such an amendment. Thank you.
I now go to, for the NDP, Ms. Nikki Ashton. Nikki, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup à nos témoins.
Thank you very much to our witnesses today. I'll start with you, Ms. Roy. As president of the FCFA, we see that there's a decline in French, and the tools that we have with Bill C-13, and I'm proud to have worked with the former official languages minister in order to have a better bill. This does not change the need to move forward with political will to put an end to the decline of French. Now let's come back to C-354, which states that the CRTC must consult provincial governments other than Quebec regarding francophone markets. I would like to know what you think about this. Do you believe that someone like Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick or Daniel Smith in Alberta, do you believe that they seek to protect francophone communities with all that we've seen from their governments? Do you believe that an amendment can be made so that francophone communities are heard by the CRTC, that this is essential for protecting the rights of these communities and allows them to act to stop the decline of French in our country? Thank you for your question, Ms. Ashton. And thank you again for all the work that you did on C-13. And we believe that it's not only a matter of the provinces, it's about the interlocutors and how they can talk about the distinctiveness of Francophone culture. Organizations would be much better suited in the provinces to identify the needs of the different groups. When we talk about Francophone markets, we need to understand the issues in our communities, as you stated. It's important to understand and define a Francophone market. I'll give the floor to the Communications Director, Serge Quintet. To answer your question, Ms. Ashton, there are two things that I would say. Firstly, it's clear that the relationship between OLMCs and their governments can vary greatly between one province to the next and between governments even. These organizations have been part of the OLMC CRTC group for 18 years and have seen different governments. Some governments were more open to the francophonie, some were less open, Some had easy relationships, others not. It is clear to us that our organizations are better placed to talk about the different realities. Another thing that I would add is that we don't want there to be a conflict of interpretation between the Online Streaming Act and the bill that you are currently studying, because if we say in the Online Streaming Act that the CRTC must consult OLMCs, and that in C354 we say that they must consult provincial and territorial governments, there might be an issue on interpretation to see which group has priority, and that's what we're trying to avoid now. Thank you for the answer. My next question is for Ms. Henrique-Adieu. Are you satisfied with the CRTC's consultation process? I know you've already talked about this, but can you share how things are now and why it's so important to make improvements? We are actively listened to. We are able to look at the entire sector in Canada in all its different dimensions. The process is not finished. There's an important step, as Serge stated. It's the CRTC that lets us know when consultations are going to happen. And we met on March 25th during a discussion group meeting, and we were told that we would be rather pleased soon and that we would feel important because there was important public consultation that was going to be carried out and that it would be focused on us. And the information has been updated on the website. They talk about summer 2024, that there's a special activity to reinforce the CRTC's capacity in official languages. But it does not talk about public consultation specifically. And so we shared concerns regarding this diluted language. But we see that they seek to consult us. We're talking about consulting us on Section 5.2 that reinforced or strengthened the way that we would be consulted and gives details on how we must move forward. We are eager to see what this step will look like in Audible.
We must wrap up now. We've gone over time on this. And answering questions and sharing with us the insights and wishes. And so what I would like to, I was going to suspend this meeting to go in camera, but I have been informed that many members of this committee feel that we could seek to get the drafting instructions on the study on the media via email. And so, because we do not have a lot of time left to finish the drafting instructions as we had hoped. So is everyone in agreement that we do that? Because if you are, then I will move that this meeting be adjourned. Pardon?
If we do that, it's helpful to set a deadline.
Yes, yes, I will. So if everyone's in agreement to send it in by email, we need to set a deadline for that. Does everyone have a deadline in mind? Yes, Michael?
What if there's a dispute in drafting instructions? Like if I send one in and just say, for example, Kevin doesn't agree with that, how do you deal with that? You just send a message back?
Well, the analysts will look at the drafting instructions. If they are what we heard at committee, then that would obviously be input. And then when we look at the draft, we can say, no, we don't like this, we don't like that. So that's one way of doing it, and it would save a lot of time. What I'm looking for is a deadline for submitting these drafting instructions. I thought you were going to suggest a deadline, Mr. Coteau.
How about Friday?
This coming Friday, is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
All right.
I can do
What
two
date
things at
is
the same
that? 'Cause my
time.
brain is not working very well right now.
Sorry, Chair, I do have a question of clarification. My understanding is that the report for Safe Sport was supposed to be tabled on Monday. I also understand that that did not happen. I'm just wondering if you can update this committee as to what is going on.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm really sorry. I'm not functioning at all. Sorry, what were you saying? My thing was off. So what were you saying?
Sorry, I'm just curious as to where things are at with tabling the Safe Sport study.
It was to be tabled today. I logged in to table it, and you saw that orders of the day were dispensed with, and we had to move to actually the orders of the day, and so I will have to do it tomorrow. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente,
Yes, Martin?
on n'a pas terminé.
We're not, we haven't decided of a deadline. I think Friday doesn't give us enough time. Perhaps next Friday, I think that would give us enough time to send information to the analysts, if that's fine with everyone.
The committee decides. Is a week Friday is going to be good? Yeah? Friday week? All right. So that would be what date? I'm sorry, Claude?
28th.
The 28th. So we have a deadline of the 28th of June to send in your drafting instructions. And then, as I explained to Michael, once we get the draft, we can look at it and see what we think. But it will at least get that work done. So, committee is in agreement to adjourn the meeting?
We are.
No one is in disagreement. Meeting adjourned.